All right. Hello. We are live here on Instagram and also on YouTube. So if you're wanting to watch this again, I know sometimes watching replays on Instagram is tricky. So just so you're aware, I have a YouTube channel as well that I post these lives to, so you can share and view them, review them there as well. Today's message is one that has been on my heart for a while, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share it with you today because this is something that when we really understand, guys, like the ability it has to transform your own life, your own experience, and truly, I believe this is part of the key to how we're going to create change in the world on a massive scale. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today has the potential to influence your personal life and relationships in very real and significant, meaningful ways, but also has the ability to transform our society and our world as large. Like, it's that comprehensive, yet at the same time, very simple, very fundamental. And I'm going to be showing you how to understand these concepts and principles in a way that you can start applying them and understanding them. So if you are anywhere in a place where maybe you see women around you and you have this growing desire to become more empowered, more alive, more yourself, more able to be you in your day-to-day life, right? I'm speaking to you. If you are somebody who's like, I feel like I've gone through this beautiful transformation journey. I feel like I found who I am. I've come to understand this way of the feminine. We're going to be talking about that more. If you don't know what that is or what I mean by it, that's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll get there. But if you're somebody who resonates with that and understands that idea, and you're like, yes, it is the most beautiful thing, and I love what I found and who I am and the way it's changing my lives, and it's been doing so many wonderful things for me, this message is also for you. It's going to help you go to the next level in that experience. And this is also for those of you who are like, yes, I've been discovering that. It's been wonderful. It's beautiful. And I'm also really hurting, right? Or maybe it has nothing quite to do with your personal journey or in understanding the feminine. Maybe it's something more personal in your day-to-day life or in your relationships. And it's like, it felt like things were going well. And then all of a sudden now it feels like everything's just kind of fallen apart, or I feel stuck, or I feel like I can't move and I'm powerless and I'm mad and I'm angry and I'm hurting and I'm just devastated at the way things are going and I don't know what to do about it. And I'm just in that real raw spot. Okay, so wherever you are in these different experiences, know that you're in the right place. Because again, the concepts I'm going to be sharing with you, they apply in each one of these different experiences. And I'm going to show you that with one of my favorite tools. So this tool, some of you have seen before, some of you may not have seen. I haven't used it or talked about it in a while. So for those of you who remember it, welcome back to the staircase model. Okay. Now, the staircase model, for those of you who are not familiar with it, this is something that I created to describe the process of growth and expansion that we go through, and particularly in terms of relationship, which is going to be a really key thing here that we're going to be talking about. So this is a visual construct of it, just to give you a basic idea and a rundown of it. Usually the two different colors here describe the masculine and the feminine. Now, important little disclaimer note here for those of you who aren't familiar. When I say masculine and feminine, I am referring to two different states, okay? And I often like to talk about them in terms of energy. This is going to be important when we talk a little bit more in a second here, because energy is sort of this intangible underlying mechanism that plays out in our relationships in the way that I use it and describe it. And so I love when I'm working with people, whether it's privately or in my coaching programs or here chatting with you, of helping people understand what is that underlying dynamic, how is it playing out, and what are the different influences that are going on. Because it's not just about what we're doing or what we're saying, as we're going to talk about here in just a minute. That underlying energy actually really plays a powerful part in the interactions and in the results that we're able to create. And so this is a visual way of helping you understand those interactions, what's going on, and why you feel like you can't quite move forward, or you feel stuck or blocked, or feel like everything's crumbling, right? It's going to come down to those underlying pieces that are playing out. Okay. So when I talk about masculine and feminine, though, I'm not necessarily referring to like gender, personality, sexuality, anything like that. They are two different collections of traits, and it kind of depends upon the context of how you're using them to what they apply to. So as I'm going to be sharing these things, it's probably going to come to your mind like an area of your life or of the world that this relates to, right? Recognize that. That's kind of a cool thing. I may give some specific examples as well as we're going through to kind of help illustrate what I mean. But you kind of have to define what is the masculine and what is the feminine in any time that you're using this, because these two states can basically represent anyone, right? It can be yourself and your spouse. It could be the business side of something and the consumer side of something, right? There's the government and the people, the right and the left, right? Like there are lots of different ways that you can describe this. So anytime we have sort of two different parties in relationship with one another, this can be used to describe that. Okay. So what has been happening is there's really 4 different stages that we move through. So this area right here, well, sorry, I'm trying to decide the best way I want to explain this. Okay, I'm actually going to use this by showing you time. Okay, I want to take you back in time to 2020. 2020 was a big year for a lot of us, and there was a big reason why. Okay, 2020 happened graphically right here. It's along this dotted line here. And if you follow this blue, we're going to assign this the feminine. And we're going to say the feminine is reconnecting with, our Western world right now is very masculine in nature, right? Their masculine traits are things like being structured, being very logical, being very, there's more individual, more competition, whereas feminine is much more intuitive, cooperative, collaborative. There's a flow to it. There's this more spiritual nature to the world and to ourselves, whereas the masculine is much more concerned about the physical, tangible, like real world here, right? So in 2020, this is where we had what I call the rising feminine. Right? The feminine went through a rise here. And a lot of women in particular had this year start a big personal journey for them, right? In discovering more about who they are, about this like feminine aspect of themselves, of the world, of their lives, right? There's lots of different ways that people describe this experience. Some describe it as like a spiritual awakening. Some would say it was a feminist awakening. Some would say it was a faith crisis. Some would say it was a call from the divine, right? My favorite way of describing it is it's this divine departure as we're moving and being called by some higher power, God, the universe, however you want to think about it, to step into something new, right? So you'll see graphically, this is kind of showing us we're reaching a new level when we go through the rise. So 2020 was really about the feminine rising there. And it is so fun now, 4 years later, to look at the difference, I feel like, between our world then and our world now, and how many resources and tools and just general understanding there is in acknowledging the importance of the feminine, in helping women really rediscover what it is to be a woman, to have this feminine understanding that we are cyclical beings, that we are intuitive beings, that there is a whole part of our life that is meant to be lived and understood through ceremony, through connection, through relationship. What does that look like? How does it affect us when it comes to menstruation, when it comes to our sexuality, when it comes to giving birth and motherhood and just the general wisdom and life cycle of a woman. Right? There are so many more valuable communities and resources and tools and opportunities for women to be moving through this. When we go through a rise like this, it's really a process of rediscovery, right? So if you're one of those women I was talking to in the beginning and you're like, maybe you feel like you're not all that capable, you're not very special, you're not somebody who can like put yourself out there, get a lot of things done, right? You kind of feel small and maybe insignificant, but there's a part of you, and maybe it's just a secret part. Maybe you haven't even really fully acknowledged it to yourself, who longs to be like other women you admire. Right? You look at them and you say, I feel like she has it all together, or she's such an inspiration, or look at the impact that she's having, or just the way that she lives her life and the confidence that she has. I wish I was like that. I wish I was more spiritual. I wish I was more sure of myself. I wish I was able to have more of the support and experiences that she's having, right? When you're in that space, that's that craving and that longing of a woman who's ready to go through the rise and is being extended an invitation to step into that experience, right? And it can be one that can be very nerve-wracking, right? Because it is saying, I am worth this. And a key part of the rise is nobody can make the decision for you. Right? You have to choose it. You have to go through that process of deciding, yeah, I am going to choose to start to believe this and explore this and uncover this. And it is so beautiful to see more and more women who are going through sort of that awakening, self-declaring, reclaiming process, right? If you are anywhere near that or in that or remember what that space was, it's such a valuable one. And a key part with the rise as well is this is a space where we often need other women around us, right? Other women there to mentor us, to support us, to kind of show us what that vision is like and what we're working towards, who we're wanting to become, and how to sort of midwife and mentor us into that process, which is why having groups and retreats and all these wonderful experiences is so valuable, particularly when you're going through that rise experience. Okay? What's up, girly? Hang on. Speaking of such, I've got my own little girl here. She's hanging out with me today. You say hi? Yeah. Oh, so smiley. You're happy now, huh? You got to be held. You want to be on camera for this too? Okay. All right. You can come hang out with us. So that is the rise, right? And powerful experience, okay? We sort of collectively continued to move through this process in 2021, 2022. Okay? So as you can see, 2021, sort of this major disruptor that happens, right? And we'll talk about the masculine side of this in a second, but here's that feminine experience of like, ooh, something new is going on. And we got some momentum here, right? In 2021, we had a lot of that feminine energy coming up to say like, these are the things that are important. These are the voices that we're going to recognize, right? Regardless of your own personal perspective and opinion in politics and any of those things, right? I want you to look beyond surface level. That's not the conversation we're going to be having right now on the specifics. And I want you to just look at the underlying energy that was playing out, right? Because there was this like underlying energy that follows this pattern. And whether you agree or disagree with, was it the best way that it played out? Should it have played out that way? That's not the point of this, right? So moving forward, we have like Black Lives Matters and the Me Too movement and things, right? Those were examples and expressions of this feminine momentum coming up and being more seen and vocal and reaching a new level, right? So we have that sort of rising action happening in 2021 following this like initial burst that happens in 2020, which then we move into 2022. And we see that sort of settle and it's like gaining some ground. It's becoming more norm and accepted as we're moving forward. And that hits 2023, where this is where a key change starts to happen. Okay. And this is going to shape the second part of our conversation here. But before we do that, I want to touch on the masculine for a sec, right? So the masculine side of things, it's like we're in this pretty normal, regular, everyday life that we're used to, right? 2020 comes along and disrupts that. majorly, right? So graphically, you can kind of see here that with this incoming burst of the feminine showing up, it causes a split in the masculine, right? Which if you think back to 2020 and a lot of like physical, tangible, day-to-day parts of life, they're very much disrupted, right? So we can see how that energy pattern was playing out in a very real way. It's disrupting our world. And what that was doing is it was actually causing masculine energy to go through what I call the flip or the descent, right? And having to sort of let go of some of the old ways of doing things and start to have to try doing things in a different way. Now, you'll notice as far as the vertical goes, right, the feminine is increasing, right? She's embracing something new, and expansion is what I call it. Whereas the masculine is growing. It's just moving forward, but it hasn't changed the vertical. That vertical space is still the same. This is going to be important for the second part of our conversation down here, which is 2024 and sort of what's going on right now. But the masculine, as we progress through this, it's sort of starting to accept the feminine and where it's taking, right? Initially, there's more of this like energy clash that's going on while the masculine is moving through this process and sort of like pushing back on the feminine as it's sort of starting to show up. But then the masculine sort of evens out and we find sort of a new norm that starts to emerge and show up here. Now, as we start approaching 2023 and into 2024, this is where the second part of the feminine starts to come into play. And this is what I really want to talk to you about, because even in our day-to-day lives, like there are these moments that are asking us to step into something new. We kind of have an understanding and way to recognize this and deal with this, right? This process here in our current society and day, we don't understand it as well. It is one of the more challenging aspects or things to go through, but it is so important and so necessary. Right? And so I want to be sharing how you can learn to understand this and navigate this from a modern perspective. Right? Because ultimately, this pattern, it really plays out over and over again. Here's an old one. Ignore the years. This is from a different thing that I was looking at. The point I want you to see is how this cycle like plays out over and over again. And this is why I call it the staircase model, because it's like stairs, right? So imagine this is a person and they're like, hello, and they're climbing up the stairs, right? And so you can see we go through this process of like feminine rise, feminine descent, or flip, feminine rise, feminine descent, or flip. And similarly, the masculine goes through that flip and rise, flip and rise. And so that's a pattern that plays out over and over. But a key part of this is never are the rises the same, right? So this rise brought us to this horizontal level. And this rise, it takes us up to a new level, right? So they're never exactly the same, which is a key part of things. And if you look at history and progression, even just of like embracing and understanding the feminine, you'll see that there's sort of these different waves, right? We even have like in the technical study of the idea of feminism, the concept of different waves of feminism and what did that look like, right? Which is a fun way of seeing this expression play out. But this process here, this is like birthing something new. It's exciting, it's invigorating, it feels like progress, it feels like moving forward, right? When we're in that perspective. Now, a lot of us in 2020, we were not in the feminine perspective of viewing this as progress. We were very much in the masculine perspective and looking at our day-to-day lives, and it was like, oh my gosh, everything is falling apart, collapsing. This is terrible, horrible, right? So from the masculine perspective right here in 2020, this was what I call a death experience, right? And here now in 2024, we have the masculine is actually going through a birth experience, while the feminine is now going through a death experience, right? Or this flip or descent that I'm going to talk about more here in a sec. And so recognizing that like our lives and our society and the cultural things that are important to us and how we embrace those are constantly shifting and going through this pattern is so important to understand and know, because it gives you a way to look at, again, whatever's going on personally in your life, or maybe what's happening in your family or your community, or again, on this like higher collective level, a new perspective to understand why this is happening, what's going on, how to move forward, how to not be in such a state of panic or anxiety or fear, and how to actually make it more smooth for us to travel through this instead of actually getting stuck. Because there are a few patterns that can play out that can really keep us stuck and cycling rather than progressing. And it's comes from not understanding this pattern of how growth and change actually happen. But when you understand the process of how change and growth happens, it's a game changer, right? It makes it an entirely different experience of how we move through it. Right? So part of that is when we are approaching this space here, right? The feminine learning how to die in essence, right, is so important, because what actually happens on the other side of this is what I call the rebirth or the new set point, right? Which was the whole original point, right? Down here in this first step, I call it the divine departure. You'll see the feminine energy is just very small. It's just starting to wake up to realize, hey, I think I want something more, to start having a new awareness about an idea. And then you make this decision where you cross that line. This is a decision point line, these larger dashed ones. That's where we make the decision of, yes, I'm going to step into this. If we don't choose to say yes, that's okay. We will get more and more invitations and opportunities to, but it's sort of like we slide back and we just kind of keep approaching this line or not, keep approaching this line or not, right? I often call this pimpling because it can cause us to go through this process where it's sort of like a pimple. Because technically we're always moving forward in time, so it's not like you're moving backwards. So you go forward, but you just come back down, right? You're not actually entering into the rise. A visual representation of that is this, right? So we're moving forward, but instead of progressing into the rise, it's like, I don't think I will, right? And sometimes we do that in part because the masculine energy is like, no how, no way, no how, I'm going to hold this here. And the feminine feels stuck and trapped. Now, this is going to be really important because the experience that you have and how you viewed going through the rise actually plays a really big role in how you experience and how much easier it is for you to go through the descent later. Right? Particularly on a nervous system level, because if this experience here felt very traumatic, right? Like you were having to break free, you were having to push through this masculine energy that was really hard and abrasive and destructive, right? Then it's going to, your body is going to sort of remember that as you approach the masculine energy here again and start interacting with it, right? And so, because what happens over here in the descent is this is all about learning how to partner again with the masculine, how to reintegrate with the masculine. Whereas this is about the feminine discovering herself and who she is and what's important and sort of that self-expression and definition. And now she has to bring that into relationship with the masculine more. Right? And so this is a reintegration with the masculine. So the closer she gets to the masculine here approaching, the more it can sort of like trigger that old anxiety from the last interaction with the masculine over here, right? Particularly because what the masculine energy is doing during this time is it is starting to rise. It means it's getting to move to a new level, which if you were perceiving and experiencing previously that the masculine was like holding this energy over you, right? You're going to have a negative association physiologically, mentally, emotionally of the masculine over you being a negative thing. right? It kept you stuck, it kept you down, it kept you blocked. Now, the reason why understanding this is so, so important, because what will happen here is instead of being able to move forward, and again, we have a dashed line here, so that means it's a choice, it's a decision point. The feminine has to choose to step into this experience. And if she doesn't, what often happens is what I call a bubble. Now, I realized I forgot to print off my visual representation of the bubble, so I'm just going to have to draw it here for you. But what in essence happens is the feminine usually feels very empowered going through the rise. We all do. It's a very empowering experience. In fact, it feels like, oh, yes, this is right. And this is where things are supposed to be going. And how did I not recognize this before? And I feel so alive. And right, that's because there's a surge of newness, of energy that's moving through us and pulling us into that next space, right? So it feels often very invigorating and empowering in that way. Right? So for the feminine, the other thing that happens is you start to see things from a new perspective, because you're no longer down at this lower level. As you start getting higher, it's like going up a mountain, you can see further, right? And so there's this like cone of vision here. That's what this line represents, right? And the feminine often doesn't want to level out. The feminine wants to just keep following this line and just like, oh yes, this would be great. Let's just keep going and going and going and going and going in this pattern here, which is part of that tension that came out in 2021. Because what's actually going on is the masculine is pulling the feminine back down into this space here. It's the masculine and her connection to him that pulls that energy down and keeps her from being in this space here, which again can be experienced by the feminine as the masculine not supporting her, going against her, not viewing these things as positive in a way, right? The masculine is seeking to ground the feminine though, and that's an important part of this pattern being able to play out. And what makes it, again, so janky in our personal lives, and we're talking a lot at a societal level here, right, is because we're fighting in opposition, and basically the feminine wants to be going in this perpetual movement, while the masculine is wanting to like stay in this lower space. And so that can feel that tension of like, something is off here. But when you learn to understand, actually, those are really powerful signals that are helping keep both of you on track. And you learn to understand them and to utilize them and bring them into your communication and your relationship. Oh my goodness, guys, how quickly you can progress through change and create new experiences and like even heal as a part of that. It just exponentially changes because you don't have to have this tug of war piece that's going on. And even from like a physiological, biological perspective or standpoint, again, understanding this, it's not so janky on your mind and on your physical body, right? Part of the problem that we have in human history in trying to create change and why it feels like we just keep playing out the same patterns over and over and over again is, one, the way that we progress and grow is this cyclical pattern, right? We go through this winding, twisting, turning, interdependent process over and over again. So we are actually meant to sort of revisit old things and bring them into the new. I'm going to show you another way to think about that in just a second. So it's not actually that we're going backwards or that we're this again. That's actually part of the process of how we change, right? But then the second component of this is why it feels like we keep playing out old patterns, or why we have such a difficult time, is because we sort of keep re-traumatizing ourselves over and over through the experience from an energetic view, right? You have going back to like medieval times, and we're just like killing each other flat out as our way of moving forward, right? Even myself, no matter where you are politically in the experience here in the United States of just having the election and electing a new president, like there was a lot of reflection going on for me personally, and gratitude and appreciation and viewing this progress that we have made collectively and societally, that we were able to have this transition of leadership, again, regardless of whether you agree with it or not. It wasn't like the start of a 7-year war. right? And who knows, maybe the future is going to bring war, is still going to come up. We're still going to have some of these things play out. But like it in the past historically would have been like, no, we can't even have a voice. We can't even have a discussion. We can't even have options for new leadership in this more peaceful way without so much more of that chaos playing out. Now, again, energetically, there's a piece of, we have these like old emotions, old energy, old experiences that have kind of been bottled up and stored that need to sort of release, right? And it's so neat to see that societally we're learning how to better regulate our emotions, regulate our nervous system, because that means less and less of it is going to be stored up that has to sort of be pressure released in the future, right? Because we're learning how to more in real time process those things for ourselves individually, but also we're going to start learning, we have this potential of how to process these things collectively. And to me, a key part of like collective emotional nervous system regulation, yes, comes down to the individual levels. We learn to do that individually. We can bring that more onto this collective level, but it's also by understanding what is regulation between masculine and feminine. And that's what this is so powerful in helping us understand what that process looks like and how we move through it. Okay. And so we have the feminine as it approaches this space here of the descent. Sorry. Very real-time video here for you. Imagine this piece right here of the feminine, and instead of like moving forward here and going onwards, it's still trying to like tilt up, right? So it creates this sort of pulling action here, right? It's trying to move up, and as the masculine stays in this rise, this actually becomes like a void, right? Or a bubble is what I like to call it. So when we don't rise, that's pimpling, we fall back down. When we sort of overrise or like refuse to go through the descent here, we create a bubble here. And if that bubble increases more and more and more, what it can do is break that apart, right? And so that's where a relationship ends, or we have a change in a career, right? This thing no longer feels aligned in some way. So sometimes that is a positive thing. That is a way that we're moving forward, is through going through this break. And yet the interesting piece is the underlying energy never goes away. Even if you change the circumstances, that underlying energy component is there. So there is a version of this where it's like it cannot actually break. Okay? And so even if you change the circumstance, the energy that you're playing in will be the same. And this is super, super important, because if you don't ever learn how to go through the descent, you're just going to bring that same problem again and again and again into the other experiences and attempts. And it can get really, really frustrating. I see particularly, when somebody, and I'm going to be talking about this in terms of the feminine, in like there's a new perspective or an important idea here, and I'm trying to teach it to the masculine, or get the masculine to understand it and to do it and to join me in this experience, right? And there's a really big disconnect in understanding how you do that in relationship with the masculine. And so what ends up often happening is the feminine starts to become the one that is bulldozing the masculine now, right? So again, the masculine here is actually trying to rise up, but the feminine is like, no, you need to stay here with me, right? The feminine wants the masculine to join her in the same space. And that's a key part of this, is recognizing that we don't actually experience it the same. And that it's not meant to be. There's supposed to be this definition between the two different pieces, and that identity between the two parties, and learning how they interact with one another is actually a key part of what creates the momentum to continue to progress together. And it's any time that we try to say, nope, you need to be doing it this way, that there's that bulldozer sense going on, right? So the feminine experiences that bulldozer sense from the masculine initially, and then the feminine can sort of be that bulldozing effect to the masculine here. And that creates this like energetic repulsion that can start to occur. In fact, what's really interesting is if we were to assign a charge here, okay, so let's say this is the masculine, we're going to put a positive charge, the feminine, we're going to put a negative charge. When we cross this decision point line, the charges switch. So the feminine moves into this positive charge, and the masculine moves into this negative one. Well, as we start approaching this space over here, the masculine starts collecting more positive charge because it's getting ready to return back to being in the positive charge, and the feminine has to start returning into the negative charge. That's like the next space to be going. But if instead the feminine is refusing to go through this descent, sorry about that, the feminine is refusing to go through this descent here and cross that line that allows the polarity to change, you now have a positive charge and a positive charge, right? And they are butting heads against each other, right? Same thing that can happen over here when the masculine is not wanting to come with the feminine. You have this positive charge against positive charge, right? So again, how this experience went down sort of shapes how is this experience going to play out? What is the feeling that each party is going to have with the last one? Okay? And so this is where it's so important, like the feminine, even visually, like this looks like a wall and you have this masculine that's coming up, and it's so easy to be like, oh, the masculine is at fault, the masculine is blocking me, it's in the way, it's not letting me progress, because the feminine energy is like, I want to stay at this level, I don't want to go up here. But the masculine is going to be having this internal experience that is like, no, we have to be going up here, this is the right way, and this is the things are supposed to be going, because the masculine does need to. It's time for a masculine rise, but it is not time for a feminine rise. And so what's interesting here is you'll notice there's only these small periods where we are on the same like horizontal level, right? Most of the time the masculine is here supporting the feminine growth, then the feminine is here holding space for the masculine growth. And there's that sort of dual interdependence upon one another that can be so wonderful and so beautiful to experience, right? But again, this is part of why the feminine feels like, oh, I'm just hitting my head, I can't go forward, I can't do any of this. The masculine is being such a butt. Why isn't he getting out of the way? Like, doesn't he understand this is not the way things are supposed to be going, right? And it's not the masculine blocking you. It's not the masculine at fault. It is the feminine refusal to go through this surrender here, right? In fact, in biblical terms, this is one of my favorite ways of being able to describe the idea of the feminine submitting to the masculine. It is this surrender that happens here. And it's actually a really beautiful example and experience of trust, of love, of moving forward together, right? And a similar experience does happen here, right? We just don't talk about this one as much. We're used to historically talking a lot, and there was a lot of emphasis and focus on this relationship dynamic of like the masculine is the one in the lead, progressing and moving forward. The feminine is the one who is submitting and surrendering to that. And so for the last, several hundred years in particular, there's been a big fight, you could say, for this part of the story to come out of like, what is it for the feminine to rise, to acknowledge her importance in leadership and showing up, and whether you want to view this as women in the workplace or women in greater leadership positions, right? And there's this masculine level of learning to also submit, to have this trust in that wisdom, in the perspective, in the way of the feminine, in what she has to share and contribute and bring forth into it, right? And ideally, overall, we have this capacity to support one another and to move through these two different processes in this way. Right? Valuing and recognizing the role of each party and at different times. But if you can't recognize what stage you're in as you're moving through this process, right? Are you in stage 1 in the divine departure? Are you here in stage 2 during the rise? Are you here in stage 3 where you're going through the descent? Or are you here at the new arrival, right? And thinking, not understanding what that process looks like either for an individual level, right? Again, part of the reason the feminine gets stuck in wanting to go in this place is believing that progress is linear. Progress is not linear. It is cyclical. It moves in this sort of, even you could say, vibrational way. So let's see. Let's see if I can put her down for a second. Yeah. So if we think of change, right, we like to think, oh, well, time is linear and we're just moving forward. And so change is linear and it's just moving forward. And so any time that it feels like we're moving forward and then we're moving back and we're moving forward and then we're moving back, it's like, oh my gosh, if the other party, right, would just stop pulling us back, we could actually progress and move forward, right? That's not what's going on though, right? This forward and back motion is actually a part of it. And there's two different ways I like to describe this. One is like a vibration, right? And so it's a vibrating going forward. I don't know if you remember back to like 8th grade science, if you ever learned about different types of waves, right? Particularly sound waves in our voice are this type of wave where they move forward like that, right? So there's a vibrational pattern here. And in fact, I was even just coaching a gal yesterday about this in her life, where it's like, this was the old version of her, and we were helping her move forward into like this new version of her. And the old version of her was in a relationship. The new version of her is not now. And so it was going through this place of like, she's like, I feel good, like I'm moving forward. And then it's like, I have these relapses or these things show up and it's like, oh, now I'm struggling again because I feel like I'm his girlfriend and not this like version of me moving forward, right? And so I was talking with her about how that's not actually a bad thing and how she can change her perspective on what's going on. She can actually use it to help her move forward more rather than getting stuck in that space, right? And so it's this oscillation of like, we move into the new and start to like gather some understanding and experience and idea of what that looks like. And then we get to revisit the old and sort of bring that positive momentum here to change our relationship with that and then progress moving forward again, right? And so it's like these little bits you're letting go and you're gaining new, and you're letting go and you're gaining new. And as you can see, that's actually this forward vibrational movement. If you were to tip it, is actually like a cycle. It's a circular one that we're moving forward, right? And so learning to see progress and change as a cyclical pattern, and this is describing how you move through those different cycles, is huge. Okay? Now, one of the most difficult things that you will ever go through, I believe, as a woman living in our day and age, is learning how to master this part of the experience, right? How to come back into that positive relationship with the masculine. The rise is huge, right? And it, oh my goodness, it can be a life disruptor. It can like cause so much chaos in your life of like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to think. I don't know how to fix my relationships with this new version, or be in relationship with people with this new version of myself, right? That's a lot of what goes on through the rise. And there are so many, again, wonderful resources and tools and practices and connections for going through the rise here. What we now need and crave and so many people are struggling with right now is how do you move through this, I call it the descent, right? So we're rising and then we're descending. But another way I like to articulate this is becoming a risen woman, the risen feminine. So we're not just rising, but we have risen, right? So we're holding that space, we're holding what has been gained and allowing us to move forward into the next cycle, right? It's that risen, steady, sure, clear piece of it. And what often gets misconstrued for a lot of women who are in this space is I'm confident and I'm clear and I know what I'm doing and I'm going to hold the line and I'm not going to let the masculine take back and I'm going to keep the space. But a lot of that energy is actually here and it's staying in that positive charge. It's not moving back into this space here, right? And that is what will continue to cause so much strife, so much heartache, so much struggle. And the reason that the feminine often doesn't want to go through this, a couple of notes here for myself. So there's a few main reasons why we struggle to move forward. One of them is this side over here, it's unknown, right? It's not clearly defined. It's like stepping into the abyss, right? And so here, yeah, we can't quite see and we don't quite understand what's on the other side, but because it's sort of like going up a mountain, you can at least see that like the mountain's there and have an idea that you're going to have a new view when you reach the top of it. That's not necessarily the case over here, right? On this side, it's like, I don't know what's going to be over here. I have this thing blocking my view, right? So how do you step into the unknown? That's one of the things that holds us back. Another one we talked about before, right, is it can feel like you're actually going backwards, like things are falling apart because it feels like this old experience here because you had masculine on top, feminine on bottom, masculine in the positive charge, feminine in the negative charge. Again, we're moving into that relationship experience. So it can feel like you're going back into this space. And so being able to know, how do you talk to your mind? How do you talk to your body? How do you bring your body and your mind through this experience when it feels so much like this past one, but you're actually creating a new one? Is so important here. Right? Having a guide who can help you with that, who can keep you grounded, who can keep you knowing how to shift that is huge to be able to do that. Right? And then the third piece of this is knowing how to actually do this in relationship with the masculine. Because while this part is really about the feminine focusing on herself, and we kind of just ignore the masculine and leave him to go through his own sort of journey here, this is the point where the feminine has to learn how to be back in that relationship with the masculine and how to actually support him. Whereas before, his journey is about learning a new way of supporting the feminine. And so what does that look like? How do I support the masculine without losing myself? How do I support the masculine when I feel like the masculine still is not ready, right? That's another huge part of this is recognizing we go through this oscillation over and over and over again. And so sometimes there is a tendency to be like, well, I'm not going to get involved with the masculine at all until whatever your reasons or things are, stipulations. And sometimes there can be value in that. There can be a necessity for that. But when you learn how to sort of do this sort of give and take of support and growth and support and growth, support and growth, oh my goodness, that is where you really have the power to transform a relationship. You are in the thick of it. You are doing it. You are not waiting for some future event of like, well, when you figure this out, then I'll come deal with you. Right? I see that with a lot of women in particular in relationship where they're like, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do this. I'm just going to go find a man who's already healed himself and already knows how to do this and already knows how to do that. And a big part of that is because they get caught up in thinking, well, I need to fix the masculine. I need to teach him these things. I need to get him to do these things if I'm going to be able to stay with him. No, the thing is you want that end result experience with him and you think you have to make him do it or teach him how to do it or get him to do it when none of those things are the case. You have to learn how to support him as he does it. and how to support him allows you the space to still be you and to hold all that beautifulness and to bring it into the relationship, right? A risen feminine, the risen feminine woman is all about learning this complete process. And what I'm so excited about is in the past, I've taught the Rising Feminine program before, and it's all about helping women move through this process of embracing the feminine. What does that look like? But what I found was then the women were like, great, I learned this new piece of me, and now I don't know what to do with it, right? And I had to go through a little bit of growth and development and figure some things out, but I am so excited to say I am now introducing the Risen Feminine program, which is going to take you through this whole thing. It's going to teach you and really focus on the second part here. Sorry, I keep holding pointing. This is the second part here, right? How do you go through this process in a beautiful way? And I'm so passionate about it. The same way I was passionate about women, we have to rediscover and re-embrace what it is to be feminine, to bring that into the world, to not hide it or dismiss it or play small anymore, right? That's this sort of, are we going to stay in this space of like, maybe, I don't know, or we're going to say, no, this is who I am. This is what it is to be a woman, to be feminine, to embrace this other beautiful, important part of life and bring it into the world that we so desperately need more of, right? But I am equally as passionate about saying, okay, yes, we bring it into the world, but we then have to understand, what does that actually look like? Right? It is one thing to do it internally, to do like all the journaling and the division and to have the ideas of like, this is what it could be like, and I wish we could have this happen, and I wish we could have this happen. But how do you actually make those changes occur in the masculine? Right? Practical example that I hear all the time from women in my faith, right, is I want these changes in the church, and I wish we could have this progress, and I wish we could have these things, and it would be so easy and so simple, and why can't they just make the decision? Why can't they just change the policy or whatever? And it's like, we just get breadcrumbs and we're craving something more. We want more of this feminine to be coming in. If you want this vision that shows up, this heart, this soul of the feminine to actually be real, tangible, physical in the world, you have to understand the risen part here. This is how you move through it. This is how you actually bring it into the world. Because ironically enough, the masculine is the one that brings it into being, as the feminine supports. And that is going to trigger some people when I say that. And I want to just sort of reassure you, if you sort of are like, oh, cringy, that does not quite feel right. That feels like I'm letting go. That feels like the women do not have power. No, right? The feminine comes in here, says, here's a vision. Then she learns how to say to the masculine, here's what I want to create. And he says, great, I will go out and I will create this. And then brings that back to her, because the cycle goes over again. And she has a role to then play in, he's creating the space, the environment, the experience, so she can play it out, right? And then come back in and sort of support each other again. So it's this dual back and forth relationship of invitation and support and creation and moving through that. And so there has to be this masculine creation part, and the feminine sort of gets that in a way, and is why the feminine can get into the space of like, no, you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and these are the rules, and all this stuff. And the masculine often just kind of pushes back against that and is like, no, get back in your place, you're doing this wrong. But when the feminine learns how to ask for the things that she wants from a place of supporting the masculine and trusting him, that is when the experience actually starts to show up in your life. It is beautiful. Like I said, we're going through this right here in 2024 on a big, massive level. And so when you're going through this death process, because it is the same way this is a birth, there's a death. Like the old way of being in the feminine has to die, and you're going to learn a new way of being in the feminine. And that is so scary to let this part die, because this is the thing that rescued you, that saved you, that brought you out of this despair and difficult and hard, bad, horrible, whatever experience, right? This is often how it's experienced by a lot of women. And so letting that part of you go feels like, well, then I'm just going to fall back down into this space. You are not going to fall. You are not going to fall, right? You're going to step into something new. You're going to step into everything that you have ever want it, is on the other side of letting that go. This is that moment in transition in birth where it's like, I can't do this anymore, right? I'm done, right? It even kind of looks like a birth canal in a way, right? And so it's this irony of like, death is birth and birth is death, right? It's that duality of an experience. And part of what happens when we go through this death experience, and part of what I do inside my program and when I work with my clients is like, I have this mapped out for you guys. It's a roadmap of the emotions you go through, the processes you go through, the actions you take, how you move your body through it, right? Because our nervous system is a big part of this, as well as our mindset. When you shift your mindset in your body, it allows you to trust the energy and follow that flow of the energy, right? So one of the things here is you're disconnecting from the old. There's this void. So there's fear is one of the first experiences that you have here. That's actually a signal that you've crossed. It's a really great thing, right? And so, but how do you navigate through that, and how do you create the vision beyond and the experience more of that, right? I want to help women move through the risen space because I know what is waiting on the other side is everything that we've seen here. Everything that we've seen here. And again, whether you're looking at this in your personal life or you're looking at this on a bigger collective scale of what is it that we're doing, this is where we have that space. Like right here, look how beautiful this is, right? This image of just these two little squares here. You have a masculine energy and you have a feminine energy in balance, in love, in partnership, in trust, in unity, in connection, in this interdependence. Like, that is the goal. That is the thing we're seeking. All right, YouTube. Sorry, my phone died. Or YouTube, you're still here. So keep watching here. But my phone died for the live. And so perfect. Like it held out to be able to create, here's the image, here's the thing that we're wanting to do there. Right. And I'm so excited to say that the Risen Feminine program is opening up for enrollment. If you want to apply, I have applications going open. Send me a DM, comment below. You can email me if you're watching this, Emily Carolyn Baker, or hello@emilycarolynbaker.com. Carolyn is 2 N's there. So C, Emily, E-M-I-L-Y, Carolyn, CAROLYNN. And then Baker, BAKR.com. But that is where you can apply to join this program. This is for you again. If you're still going through the rising part, you will still get benefit from this program, right? It's going to walk you through that experience, the tools and things that I'm going to be teaching you, but also it's going to take women through that risen part, right? You're going to get the whole experience with this, and it is so powerful, so beautiful. And I know right now I have 5 spots open for women who are ready for this. So if you've been watching this, you're listening to this, you're going, this is for me. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I cannot wait to have you join us. Make sure you send me the DM so you can get that application. I can't wait to have you join us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.